Testing 1, 2.
Are those all linked to Dropbox there?
I think, oh no, I don't know if these are linked. I think it's a USB stick that they dropped off.
Oh, okay, yeah. We
Yeah.
just had some updates in the Dropbox.
Gotcha, yeah.
Should I bring them over on a USB?
If you want, or if you have your Dropbox login stuff, maybe you can do it from there. That is up to you. USB port and stuff is right on the front here.
Okay,
It's like a
I'll do
little
that.
computer. Yeah. Yeah, and then feel free to grab, get your slides up, whatever you guys need. I'm gonna be here. I might have to run out, kind of doing the roaming
Okay.
directing thing, but I'll make sure things go along first here. I'm Mike, by the way.
Mike, Gabe.
Gabe, it's good to see you.
Is there gonna be a panel here?
Yeah.
Testing 1, 2.
have slides in that library.
Can you open mine, see if the fonts are open?
It's okay?
Yeah. Yeah, it's fine. Mostly just.
Are these playing? Oh, they're coming. Cool. Marcel's group to 46. Glad I made my little sign.
Or I'm in social science.
He's good. Yeah. Just checked it.
Okay. So having well,
Oh, I got it.
there's more stuff that we're working on.
Okay.
Yeah, and I can send I am. And that email here. Or you can text it. Is there something?
Yeah. Yeah. So we'll give it a moment.
Actually, that's when we give them ourselves. 9 358 6341. That's just text it. Maybe that's
That worked.
Thanks for your help last time.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. My pleasure.
Yeah, it went fairly well.
Yeah.
In terms of technical things.
Yeah, yeah. It's a cool movie, too.
Thanks.
Yeah,
Watched it.
absolutely, yeah.
Look at you, you're navigating. You're fast to the Look at that. I've got to think about doing that. I'm always running low on cards. It never occurred to me that I could just do a digital version. Are you filming this session? Stupid question.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Yeah, yes. Yeah, we're recording audio and video for all the sessions.
For all the sessions?
Except the cohort sessions for the later end of the day.
Impressive.
Yeah, yeah. It's a lot.
Quite an undertaking.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll remember again. Yeah, likewise. Navigating a French is a beer. I like to go upstairs to sail
All right, why don't we get started? Welcome everyone. This is the session on disasters as a window of opportunity, alternative energy pathways. My name is Gabe Chan. I'm an assistant professor at the University of Minnesota at the Humphrey School of Public Affairs. I want to welcome you to the session with a couple of opening comments and then turn it over to our four panelists. So energy has, for I think a long time, been invisible, at least in the way that we make decisions about it. A lot of our policies and institutions around energy have been designed with the presumption that energy should be invisible, that the lights go on when you flick the switch. But I think this is a very privileged view, and I think a lot of decisions, revelations, the news has made it such that when you look across the globe, when you look at corners of the world that are often left behind, that actually energy is not invisible, and that disasters, like we'll be talking about today, actually uncover a lot of the essentiality of energy. And a few quick examples to make that point. Climate change has been the first and foremost reason why there's been more international attention in fora like the United Nations on energy. That a lot of the political attention to energy has been driven by trying to understand how do we deal with climate change. If we look across the United States, the average household in the United States spends less than 3% of their income on energy. But if you look at households below the federal poverty level, that number is 17%. I think this notion of energy burden really highlights how important energy is for so much of the population. And we think about our policies for alleviating poverty. Actually, energy is quite important for that, 17% of income. I think we see now, if you read the news just this week, how energy can lead to political instability. Look at Iran right now. There's massive protests going on, driven by increase in energy prices. But also just in the last few years, you can look at what's happened in France, and you can also look at what's happened in Chile, where transportation prices were the genesis for a lot of the most recent sparking of conflict there. And finally, what we'll be talking about today, disasters, unveiling why energy is so essential for thinking about well-being in the 21st century. So this raises the question of how we think about energy transitions. How do we change the energy system from the one we have today to the one that creates more well-being? I think a lot of the visioning that's happened has been focused around how do we change the physical system, how do we get the right technologies in places, how do we get the grid operating the right way, how do we basically get the engineers to solve this problem? And I think what's been left behind has been thinking about how do we change the institutions that drive those changes. I think really what's needed and what we'll be focusing on, hopefully in this panel, are how do we create institutional change that leads to the kinds of system change we need. And so then once we start thinking about energy system institutions, I think we need to think about how are those institutions accountable? How do we think about notions of democratic norms in the energy system? And one of the hardest parts is that we have energy governance bodies that are not democratic. They sometimes are captured by concentrated corporate interests or concentrated institutional interests, but also they're highly technocratic, that actually participating in energy decision-making requires a lot of expertise. And so while energy is essential to a modern lifestyle, you cannot have a quality lifestyle in the 21st century. You cannot create businesses. You cannot have economic growth without energy in the way we set up our society. That actually changing the key institutions around energy requires a lot of expertise and a lot of political action in the face of concentrated interest. And so therefore, our energy decisions are quite disempowering. And so to frame this panel, I want to ask the question, how can academia, how can universities play a role in this highly political energy governance system? And how can academia realize some of its potential to rebalance power in energy decisions? Universities have unique capabilities as knowledge-focused organizations with academic freedom, with capabilities of a nonprofit, and sometimes of a public institution. And so not only what is the capability of universities, but what is the opportunity cost of universities not engaging in political energy decisions? And so with that, I want to turn it over to our panel now. We have 4 excellent speakers. First up will be Marcel Castro-Citeriche, who's an associate professor of electrical engineering and the co-director for the Center for Hemispherical Cooperation, Research, and Education in Engineering and Applied Science at the University of Puerto Rico, Miami.
Okay. Buenos días. Glad to be here. I'm going to start the time now. Yeah, okay. Thank you for the backup. So I can move here. All right, so this is Maria. In a way, this is what brings us here. And I wanted to talk about numbers, but numbers that are relevant. Maybe some of you have never heard. I hope that at least there's some numbers. The first one is 526. Today it's been 526 years since we do not have sovereignty in Puerto Rico. Or that process started with the arrival of Christopher Columbus 526 years ago. And sovereignty is important for what we're going to be discussing today about energy. Also, 2 years ago, in 2017, today marked the 60th day after Maria, so almost 2 months after Maria, and at that time, 2/3 of the population, approximately, still did not have power. And 11 municipalities didn't have not even one connection to PREPA, 60 days afterward. And there was one Oasis de Luz, which is one effort that is very much related to Inés and Rice. It was installed November 9th, 2017, so it was just freshly providing energy in Jayuya, which was one of the 11 municipalities without no power at all. These were the 11 municipalities without power 60 days after Maria, 61 days after Maria. And this gives us a context, this is the Oasis of Life, Oasis de Luz, to what I want to talk about today, because there is an inherent unequal access to power. In many aspects, as in Puerto Rico, perhaps the most important one is access to power after a hurricane. And this is something that we can measure from resiliency, and this is my definition of resilience. It's very simple, it's not academic resilience in terms of power. In general, it's first you have to survive, right, after a disaster. And there are many things that are related to that. I'm going to focus on access to energy. But the other thing is, you need to have a minimum quality of life. Gabriel mentioned earlier that the well-being is important. So you just don't want to survive, you want to maintain a minimum of well-being. And what are the things that you need for that? So that's my non-academic definition of resilience, at least for now. And I wanted to emphasize on the part of unequal power. And how do we look at that? There is some things that are obvious, right? This is the restoration of the system. So there are some people that spend a few days without power. Some people spend 329 days. So right there you see the inequality. But even the graph, this shows people with power. But when we look at those without power, it tells you, graphs tells you different things. So here you focus on those that did not have power. Here you have those that recover power, right? So those at the bottom, that tells us something that we need to focus on those. And how do we study that? How we prioritize those? Another aspect was the death caused by the hurricane, but not so much that by the hurricane, but by for example, lack of electricity after the hurricane. There is an estimate of almost 3,000. And there are different studies, but I use that one because it's the one that was supported by the government. And also, the Centro de Periodismo Investigativo have a report that they got early on about 497 cases specifically. And there's some inequalities there, as you can see in this one. The people with a lower socioeconomic development index, they were dying at a much higher rate. The other thing from this study, based in George Washington University, is where's the location of the people that died at higher rates. I hope we can collaborate to find the best mapping of people that died and what best estimate we can get and how we can use that to improve the energy resilience. Now, there are some people looking at the regional level. For example, PREPA is divided by region. So one measure that we have is here, you can see that while most regions were like 86, 80, 90%, Caguas region was 58% in terms of the customers with power. This is the graph of all these 2 years that we collected. And you can see the region of Caguas, how it's lagging. So how do we, and this is the same data, but with people. These are people without power, and you can see in the bottom, you cannot tell, when we do zoom out, the region of Caguas had a lot of people, more than anywhere else, any other region. So how do we use that to divide the money, the restoration money is supposed to come? What other ways we could do that? I have talked about choles, maybe that's the most thing that I have talked about the last year. I'm not going to talk about it too much, but I do want to mention something. This is the customer hours of lost electricity service. This is how you calculate it. And this is the result of it. So this is the total accumulation of hours of without electricity for customers. And for me, what is important about here is that you could say, well, even though there are some people that up in the mountain that are not given priority in the restoration process, we need to give priority in the mitigation, in the emergency preparedness, because they contributed about 1/3 of the total choles, even though they're only 14% of the customers. So that's something that to think about how to divide it. Those that spend more than 156 days without power, 200,000 families pretty much. This is the total amount of choles compared to other events, more than 3,000 million for Maria. But now, when I focus on the last 200,000, is still in the ballpark with these other events. But now, when we look at average days without power, for the whole Maria event was 94 days. But for these last 200,000, the average was 191 days without power for 200,000 families. How does that compare to, for example, Sandy? Sandy, people affected by Sandy spent an average of 4 days without power. So this gives you an idea of how to put that into perspective. Grid architecture. So we have many ways to rebuild the grid or to think about it again. And grid architecture right now is being thought through the IRP. And there have 3 strategies, 6 scenarios. The strategies are pretty simple: centralized, decentralized, and hybrid. But everything can fit in hybrid, right? You can put, it's a big bag, you can put everything in there. And now, when we look at the scenarios, I say 6 gas scenarios because all of them has to do with gas. No gas, gas in the north, gas here, but here. So you see 3, 4, 5, and 6 are for scenario 4. So we're not really looking at all this broad spectrum of scenarios, and that is very important to point out. And Ruth has been talking about it for the last day and a half, and it's important to work on that. So we're breaking the island, or we're not, but Siemens and PREPA are breaking that in mini grids, and there's some puzzle. This was me last weekend with my family in the Mayagüez Public Library. I found this, I thought it was great, because there are many ways to have this puzzle. It's an actual puzzle in Mayagüez Library for children. This is the IRP by Siemens. That's how they propose to divide it. This is sort of like the more network version of it. And these are the actual regions. But the question is, how are we serving those that were connected the last? Because mini grids are still grids that are going to benefit the urban areas of these regions, because you don't have to wait for having the whole system back up. So it's going to benefit people, but not the ones that were connected the last. And that needs to be clear when we look about around mini grids and where are the microgrids that they're talking about, where are they going to be installed. So the proposal is radical power decentralization, starting at the household level. So let's say 200,000 houses with a solar home system with battery that could be taken down. You can take down the 6 panels and put them back in the next couple of days. So if your community spends 7 months without power, then in a way we don't have to worry about it because we have something backup to at least survive. We're talking about a small system to run refrigerator, lights, and some devices. We need a capital investment about 1.4 billion, which sounds a lot, but when you compare that to 20 billion that is being proposed for PREPA, it's not really that much. And the benefit and quality of life and saving life is really, really the most impactful. So where do we start? I would say starting in Urutungo. Those of you not familiar with Urutungo is just a very far away place. But it just happened that the very last house reconnected to PREPA that was in Ponce is very close to Hacienda Urutungo. So that's why I say, okay, this is Urutungo power effort that we need to do. And then we map out, these were the communities that were reconnected in August. This is July, all this 2018. June and May. That's what we did. We got this information from Twitter. Now, if you want to look in more a broader amount of people reconnected, you can look at the work by Resilient Power, the Peer Energy Toolkit. They have from late January until August. It's the same thing, pretty similar methodology, is just map those, and this is a great work. So then we don't need to start with the last 200,000, we can think of 500,000 houses. And then now, how much are the houses consuming? And this is very recent, thanks to Hector Cordero, which is now in another panel that I couldn't attend for being here. And group says video about that for next time. But this is how much, what's the size of the PVCs now that we need based on the actual consumption by house that we need. And these are the percentage of households, pretty much. So here you can see in amount of households. And just for you to have an idea, this is 2.1 kilowatt PV system. And from here, there are about 385,000 families that right now consume so little that will be enough to cover their energy needs. So that gives you an idea of what we're talking about. And so I propose to work on the Urutungo Power to work with this data, some other people that are more experienced on this. So to finish, collaborations. What would I like to collaborate? To build resilient metrics, I would say first, less than 100 deaths after a hurricane like Maria. How can we work together that we can predict scientifically that we'll have less than 100 deaths with a hurricane like Maria? The other one, days without power. The average was 94 days. How can we work to have an average that is 4 days? And how do we estimate? And that is a very simple way of that you can communicate. Well, are you willing to be 4 days without power, or 94? How much are you willing to invest? And a minimum of energy. How much energy do we need to live well? And that varies depending on health conditions, for example. And the Choles Customers of Plus Electricity Service, I propose that us to look at the reconstruction money and see how we can work to equitably distribute those funds. This is the path of Maria. What if we have a different scenario and we have different communities affected? How can we model that and see what we need? What is the solar workforce development that we need for this? And the capital investment. So the in theory is there, 4 billion in the construction plan, about 400 million in the CDBG, but we need to channel in a way that help people like this in Jayuya, that 2 days after the Oasis of Luz was installed, was providing power in Jayuya's plaza. So I hope that we can continue conversation and establish more collaborations. Thank you very much.
All right, next up is Leonel Orama, who is a professor and co-director of UNESI.
Good morning to all. Buenos días. I'll try to give context to the whole energy situation and in the rise in the context of the RISE conference. And I am very grateful to Marcel, which started that job of giving context to the conference. Where do I? This is.
There's a mouse underneath.
That's all. Sorry. So this is the island of Puerto Rico, as you may have seen it before. What I am pointed out here is the approximate route of Hurricane Maria in yellow. It enters in the southeast coast, devastating this area in ways that we never imagined would happen just until Dorian in the Bahamas. And the picture also shows the network in Puerto Rico, specifically the 230 kV and the 150 kV, which are the transmission system. Why I'm pointing this out? Because in terms of energy and the recovery of energy in Puerto Rico, that was the weakest link. The transmission network in Puerto Rico was the weakest link. As you can see from I'll try to move here. As you can see from the trajectory of the hurricane, and these solid lines are the 230 kV transmission network. This specifically is one that got much attention because it was the 50,700 line number 50,700, and that line, because of where it is running through the Cordillera Central, it's a very difficult line to construct back. Actually, it was very difficult to create the line in the first place. That's why in Puerto Rico we innovate some 60 years ago to create those lines on those difficult mountainous areas, using helicopters to actually put down the transmission lines. So no matter how strong we create a transmission system, if we have the same situation, we will have the same damage to the transmission lines. I will show, well, before that, as you can see, there's, if you can see it, I'm not sure. I see it because I watch these things on a daily basis. So those lines, the lines in the solid lines are 200 kV. The ones that are called the dotted lines are the 150 kV, and most of those lines went down because of the towers were not able to sustain the complexities of a hurricane, category 4, category 5 hurricane. Complexities, I mean sub-tornadoes or micro-tornadoes, probable, or the possibility of resonance in the mechanical vibrations of the lines, of the supportive isolators, the strength of the transmission tower, etc., etc., etc. So what did happen is that before we had some energy at the San Juan area, since all this area in the east and in the center was down, Prepa had to work alone because that was before the contract signed with Whitefish. Yeah. They have to recover this transmission system all the way through the east, through the west, just to get energy to the San Juan area. So, that's not close to resilient or reliable system. So basically that's what we got. Even the year before the hurricane, we have a blackout, total blackout, just because a weather phenomena called the lightning strike took down a line, and the surge from the lightning went down to this substation, which is, you can guess, which is in the area of Guayama, of Salinas, Guayama, where the Aguirre, the big Aguirre power plant is seated. So just because this transmission line, the 5700, went down, and actually the line didn't went down in that event, just because of the surge through the line, took down the oil circuit breakers and created a big fire in the substation. The whole system in Puerto Rico went from that picture on the top to the picture below, which is nothing. You can see nothing right here. The PowerPoint messed it up, but down there you see nothing in that net. So that was a year before. So basically, what we should have learned at that time was that anything related to weather would take our system down in just a minute. So, year after that, you know what happened? Irma and Maria. This is the distribution network. Just a few of the hundreds and hundreds of pictures that we have. This is the transmission network. You can see the twisting of the transmission tower, and you know, those most probably was caused because of micro tornadoes or something like that. So, summary of damages, you have, you know this thing. On September 21st, actually, not a single client had service. 80% of the electrical network was down. Over 3,000 million customer hours of lost electricity service. The chores that Marcel was talking about was starting to be developed, because you know that on that day started the blackout, and it ended almost a year after that. It became the longest outage in the U.S. electrical history, and actually the second largest blackout in the history of the plant, right? Before and after 2017, lots of the decision regarding the electrical systems were wrong. Because of the financial crisis, instead of having 1,200 linemen, we have only 300 or 400 linemen. The first month between the hurricanes and after the hurricane, there were no signed contracts with any company. The first one was Whitefish. The 18th of October was the signature of that contract, etc., etc. You know a lot of those details also. The official death count is in the vicinity of 3,000, and evidently that's a great window of opportunity for an alternate pathway. Efforts to find a new pathway. There's a lot of these reports and efforts that have been happening in Puerto Rico for the last 2 years. Most of those reports agree that we have to change the way the system is created. So we definitely need to consider other kinds of alternatives to transmit and distribute the energy. Those are NGOs arriving at the scene after Hurricane Maria. Those are lots of promises that happens that have been happening about. And, you know, especially with the microgrids, which we studied, Marcela and I and a group of 7 other colleagues at Mayagüez are trying to develop. But we have a big problem. I hope I have a minute for that. The big problem, I call it the Bermuda Triangle. The Bermuda Triangle is that we have Act 19, which is the legal framework to work the energy issue in Puerto Rico. It declares natural gas for a transition. I believe we don't have to go through transition. We should stick to oil until we get the 100% renewables done. The RSA, which is the agreement with the bondholders, they just want to repay the bondholders. They don't have any concern about the issues that we really have. The IRP, which Marcel mentioned, basically the preferred scenario for PREPA is mega natural gas generating units, area network islanding, utility scale renewal, where they are not considering what we are trying to push for, which is the Horotungo power, basically. In the context of the events that we are facing in the planet. There is this issue of capitalism of disaster, FEMA Cobra Affair, Corps of Engineering, Floor Enterprises, Power Secure Affairs, and the time is up, so I hope we can have a nice chat about these topics, and we have the opportunity to tell you a little bit more about what we consider the new pathway for energy. Thank you.
Next up, we have Nick Pevsner, who's a senior lecturer of landscape architecture at the University of Pennsylvania.
All right, hi everyone. So yeah, I teach in a design program at UPenn. So when I took students to Puerto Rico last fall, about 1 year, 2 months after Hurricane Maria, I was aware that our response would be a little bit less tangible than some of the other more immediately applicable professions, because we know that design is by definition future-oriented, projective, not kind of able to deal with kind of the immediate challenges. Design is also slow. So I charge my landscapes architecture students to think not about what they would do in the immediate post-disaster response, but the long-term recovery process. And I see, and I charge them to see what opportunities they have to introduce, yes, resilience to the system, but also an idea of community power and community empowerment. So I'll mostly be showing student work today that was produced by my Penn landscape architecture students, and also some early research produced in collaboration with a city planning class led by David Gouverneur and Allison Lassiter, with the students working together. So before going down at the start of the studio, I asked my students to look at how the breakdown of energy infrastructure caused breakdowns in other critical services. And so, they identified quickly these interrelated critical services and the cascading failures of energy that caused failures in the others. And at the same time, they were getting grounded in the history and evolution of Puerto Rican urban form, infrastructure, economy, politics, and natural systems. So we had one group study the interconnected failures of infrastructure, comparing this storm to previous ones, this disaster response to other major storms. They quickly identified the Jones Act as a major exacerbating factor, slowing down the federal disaster response. They learned and mapped how closed roads had left relief supply stranded at port, the effect on hospitals that had to rely on generators as they had trouble sourcing diesel for those generators. And in looking for cause of grid failure, they of course focused very quickly on the long distance transmission lines. Lionel gave us a really great coverage of this, so I won't go into it. And then zooming in, some of the students looked at energy infrastructure in the vicinity of one of our sites near Naguabo and Fajardo, where the failures corresponded mainly with the large centralized power plants, the fossil plants, but also the large renewable energy providers. So Punta Lima, which we know had design flaws.